as a nation, we took a collective trip to the gynecologist this year, from transvaginal probes and aspirin between the knees to heated debates over the moment of conception. This year has been a banner year for female anatomy. This year alone, we've seen the clock rolled back on violence against women and reproductive rights in Congress, and witnessed a record number of state laws restricting women's health care. Some of these discussions were deemed downright pornographic, especially when taken up by female legislatures. In fact, just a few weeks ago, Michigan State Representative Lisa Brown was sanctioned for her speech during a debate over an anti-choice law, daring to refer to her vagina by name. Not that she had named it, she just called it a vagina. Brown was barred from speaking on the floor afterwards. And in response, the women of Michigan took to the Capitol steps to talk about their sexuality on their own terms with the reading of Eve Ensler's Vagina Monologues. Now, through that performance, these women showed that while the political arena permits in-depth discussion of female anatomy, a real discussion of sex is lacking. If we're already deconstructing sex on the State House floor, let's deconstruct it for real, feminist style. Let's talk about the forum where a large number of Americans encounter sex, not the legislature, but pornography. Yes, the pornography industry. Let's bring porn into this month-long national sex ed class. Here with me at the table is sex educator and feminist pornographer Tristan Taormino. She's also the host of the radio show Sex Out Loud and author of the feminist porn book, The Politics of Producing Pleasure. Zephyr Teachout returns. She's associate professor of law at Fordham University. Jacqueline Friedman, author of What You Really, Really Want, The Smart Girl's Shame-Free Guide to Sex and Safety. And Michael Eric Dyson, sociology professor at Georgetown University, who earlier said, tap that gas, about the Keystone Pipeline, apparently foreshadowing this conversation. So let me back up and say, you know, it's a little bit odd, probably, to have a conversation about porn on a political show, and yet somehow it doesn't feel odd. Talk to me about why you think this is a conversation worth having.
Well, for me, as a feminist, I think making porn is a political act. I don't think other feminists all agree about that, yep. But I think for me, we need to embrace this cultural medium that's so powerful, and so I consider my porn political because I'm trying to make a different kind of porn.
Yeah, that is a tough sell, right? So, like, I mean, if I'm sitting at home right now in Wisconsin and I just sent my daughter out of the room and you said, look, you know, my political act for the day is pornography. The fact is, you know, lots of feminists, right? In fact, there's been a bit of a brouhaha going on right now on Twitter about this, but lots of feminists say, hey, porn is bad for women. That if we're going to have this conversation about rolling back violence against women, and we're going to have this conversation about rolling back women's reproductive rights, if there is something I'd like to roll back, it's porn. Why shouldn't that be?
Well, can we talk about Rush Limbaugh and Sandra Fluke for a minute?
Oh, yes, please.
Because I think it gets to the crux of the matter. When Rush Limbaugh started his attack on Sandra Fluke, what he said when he needed to up the ante was, if we need to pay for your birth control, then you need to make a sex tape for us, right? Yeah. And I think that what's interesting about that is he didn't feel at all ashamed to say that he would like to watch such a sex tape, but the implication was that it would be degrading for her to perform in it. And what that gets to is always the question of female sexual agency, right? The question isn't whether or not women should be sexual or not sexual, or consume sexual images or not consume sexual images. The question is, do we, as women, is our sexual agency taken as seriously as men? Like, can we say, I'm a sexual creature publicly without having that considered degrading?
Right, because first she was a slut for talking about birth control, and then he ups the ante with the sex tape thing. All right, so I'm a sex positive feminist. Like, I really fundamentally agree with this position that what we need to do is teach people that sex is not the worst. But then I wonder about that sexual agency question. Yeah. Is pornography something that contributes to women's sense of sexual agency, or pulls away from it?
Well, I think you have to separate out, first of all, define porn.
Yeah.
So porn,
I know it when I see it.
That's a supreme judgment.
And so if porn is images designed to create some kind of sexual arousal, maybe we'll use that as a baseline definition. That's a traditional definition that has a lot to do with maybe 1960s, 1970s magazines and idea of what porn is. Right now, people's interaction with non-intimate sexual imagery or conversation is across the board. You see it in video, you have it on non-sexy websites, you have it, and I think we want to, it's a big part of people's lives.
My 4th of July was almost completely ruined because I told my mother and my mother-in-law that we were going to do a segment on porn, and they began to talk about 50 Shades of Grey. Right. And having to listen to my 65-plus parental figures talk about a book that makes me blush was stunning, but it's exactly this point. The notion of, I mean, certainly 50 Shades of Grey would have counted as porn at some point, and now it's, you know, you read it on the airplane.
But you know what's fascinating for me, I mean, all of this as the male feminist on the panel is thinking about being self-critical about my own gender, because it's the male gaze, right? Yeah. So Rush Limbaugh is cool as long as sex serves him. It's not cool when the sex serves itself. Janet Jackson can show a nanosecond of nipple on television so that when that nipple is integrated into the fabric of male desire, it works. But when it wants to work for itself, establish its own union, and come out, so to speak, then she's demonized. Kim Kardashian is celebrated in this culture in a way that Janet Jackson has been demonized. So I think that the racial template is quite interesting to me, besides the male versus female, and how that plays out in terms of whose bodies, female-wise, are accepted as legitimate objects of porn and others who have been demonized within there.
I think it's really important that you brought up race, because if we look at the sort of pop culture moments for women's sexuality recently, we talk about 50 Shades of Grey, right now Magic Mike, also Girls, they're all white women. And I have issues with all of them, and I don't think that they're necessarily showing what female sexual agency looks like. Even these examples that are supposedly, oh my God, women like sex, it's so exciting. I mean, we can get into those details, but I think it's really important that even when we're talking about who can even experiment with putting their toe over that line, it's white women.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me as a feminist, making porn that shows different kinds of bodies and different gender expressions, and that's part of the mission. I mean, I personally always include people of color in my porn because they are considered second-class citizens in other porn. They're fetishized, they're sort of hyper-sexualized, they're only put in these really stereotypical roles.
Right. That's interesting to me, because if you talk about the construction of the black male crotch as the significant center of sexual desire, that which has been both denied and pursued, why is it that Lexus, Steele or Mr. Marcus, Lexington Steele or Mr. Marcus are being demonized, but Peter North is being celebrated? And some women will do scenes with these white male stars, but not the black male stars. And it's interesting to me. And then also that women get paid a lot more than men, and yet it's a man's game. I mean, it's
I think this question about what is it the male gaze, right? So part. I mean, one of the things we were kind of looking at as we were looking at our numbers is just how many women consume pornography, and the sense that, and I want to talk about this a bit when we come back. This idea that desire is endogenous. So in other words, that it's not like, well, people have sexual preferences, but that actually what we see, what we engage with, can in fact impact what we think we want, right? And what we think of as sexy and good, and whether or not, for example, we think condoms are hot, which we're going to talk a bit about next. So up next, even pornography is not recession-proof. It turns out that this multi-billion-dollar industry, the internet, it's changing some things. But also, I want you to answer this trivia.